talking about? All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give it a minute and make sure that everyone gets in from the waiting room, and we'll get started in just a second. Thanks for joining us. Emily, we need to come up with like a routine to do while we wait.
No, I'm just staring at each other.
Or something.
We could dance, Kels.
Oh gosh, no one wants to see that. People start dropping back off.
It starts to go back down.
Okay, well, I guess we can go ahead and get started. Good morning, Tony. For those I haven't met yet, my name is Kelsey Erickson Streufert. I have the honor of being the Chief Public Affairs Officer for the Texas Restaurant Association. We are going to dive into the material here in a second. This is part of the Emily and Kelsey's Texas tour. We decided that we didn't have enough available days in our calendar, quite literally, to hit every chapter in person this year. But we wanted to make sure that every restaurant operator, every team member across our state had an opportunity to really hear about our wins from this past session, because they do impact every single food service business across the state. So we decided to add 2 of these kind of virtual stops on our Texas tour. And so we're going to dig into the material, but first I want to kick it over to Emily and just ask her to kind of say a few words and kick us started.
Yeah, you bet. Welcome, everyone. Yes, this is kind of nice in a way. I hate that we're not out meeting people in person today, but as Kelsey said, it's extraordinarily busy because although the session ended, we're already actually working on and really handling issues that are going to be apparent next session. And I think that's the point of today, is to share with you all the wins that really were created by you. And so 2 years ago, Kelsey and I went on the road and drove the entire state of Texas. I get flashbacks thinking about that. But we really learned what mattered. Yeah, what was important. What did you need? What did you need to change? We all know that the regulatory environment impacts you so much more than you know each day. That's why we're here. And we delivered a lot of success this year for you. And so I think what we want to do is Kelsey's going to walk you through, take notes. We are recording this, Kelsey, I believe. So you can refer back if there are team members of yours, HR, chief operating, IT, whatever it may be. You're welcome to share this. And then also at the end, if there's time for questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you about those things that are still maybe inhibiting or your opportunity to be more successful here in Texas, or if there's things that you think are opportunities for us to help tackle on your behalf. So we are all very fortunate to have Kelsey's leadership in the Capitol. Arguably probably one of our best sessions, hard to beat the last session, but this one may be the best yet, and we'll explain why. So thanks for joining us. We'll be here to ask questions, and to get going, there's a lot to tell you. Kelsey, take it away.
Sounds good. Let me share my screen really fast. Bear with me here.
Is it coming?
We shall see. Of course, it's giving me an error. I think I got to change some settings here all of a sudden.
Uh-oh.
Okay, we can't do that.
Can Erica share it?
No, it's cooperating. Just needed a minute.
There we go.
Just needed a minute. Okay, can everyone see that that landing page screen there? Emily, are you seeing that? Perfect. Okay, let's dive in. So first, some housekeeping items. Just keep in mind, we can't provide legal advice to individual restaurants. So this truly is meant to be general education to get you oriented. We do have our TRA Law Center. If you have a specific legal issue that you do need help with, that's a member benefit that we offer. So just reach out to us and we can get you connected with that. And then, as Emily said, we really want this to be interactive. So if you have questions, if you have ideas or comments or suggestions, please use that chat feature and we'll monitor that as we go. And especially at the end, really want to hear from y'all. As Emily said, we've accomplished so much in the past 3 years, but I like to say that advocacy is a 365-day a year, 24/7 operation. There's always more that we can do to improve the operating environment for restaurants, and we get our best ideas from y'all. You'll see there's bills that we got passed this past session that are a direct result of someone sharing an idea with us on last year's Texas tour. So go ahead and start thinking now about the issues that you're facing and the policies that we might be able to impact in the future. So first and foremost, what's sort of the big picture of this past Texas legislative session? And here's really how I sum it up in one theme. We always want to work in a bipartisan, collaborative way. I think that's really important because the Texas legislative session is a really narrow window of opportunity. It is capped at 140 days in our Texas Constitution. It only happens every other year. And so you really have to start a legislative session with a very clear strategic plan of how you're going to get things done. Otherwise, you're just not going to make any progress because the time period is so short and goes so quickly. We also work in a really collaborative way. There are a lot of industries that have similar problems to us, whether it's credit card fees, whether it's taxes, whether it's workforce shortages. Restaurants are not the only industry facing these challenges. And so where we can, we like to partner with other organizations so that we can really expand our impact. And then as Emily said, we did this really successfully last session. Oh, computer has a mind of its own today. Really successfully last session, and we're able to really deliver one of the best legislative sessions that I think we've ever had. So here's sort of the details, the numbers. There were over 8,500 unique bills filed this past session. Only 16% of them passed. As I said, it's a narrow window of opportunity. The Texas legislature is really designed to kill bills, not to pass bills. And then an additional 76 bills were vetoed by Governor Abbott. That is a record or close to a record. We won't get into the whys. The good news is none of our bills were impacted. And as I said, it's capped at 140 days, and they really only work about 70 of those days once you take out weekends, holidays, and that sort of thing. So here's sort of our session by the numbers. We had over 70 wins in 70 days. I like to talk about these as offense and defense. Most of us are sports fans in some way, shape, form, or another. Not as much as Emily. She's the biggest basketball fan I think I've ever met. But you know, we've got to have both parts, right? We've got to have a strong offense and a strong defense. The defense is one of the most important things that we do on behalf of our members. We'll get into some of our defensive wins in a bit. But I just like to flag that that's really important work that you don't always necessarily feel, right? You don't get a bill from the government that says, here's what your taxes would be if we had passed these laws. But I can guarantee you your tax bill would have gone up had it not been for some of our defensive wins. All told, we tracked over 1,100 different pieces of legislation. We testified 22 times. We sent over 2,800 emails. And most importantly, we had a 100% success rate blocking TRA opposed bills. Very proud of that. Here's sort of our, oh, yep, Em, were you saying something?
No, I didn't know if you could share this and just have the one slide.
What do you mean? Have both pieces on one?
No. The screen is showing us the slide, the next slide, and all the slides at the bottom.
Oh, it is. Why is it doing that?
It's probably okay. I like to follow along, but
is that better?
There we go.
Okay.
Yes, that's perfect.
We learn something new about technology every day, guys. I'm a lawyer. I'm not an IT person. So
well, and it's funny because I thought, oh, this is a new way to do it. How cool, because I'm not technically savvy either. So this is perfect.
All right. Sorry, y'all. Thanks for bearing with us. So here is our, what we call our TRA tracker. It gives you kind of a snapshot as we go through the session of the bills that we are trying to get passed in real time. Here's the second piece of that, and we're going to go through these in more detail. Okay, so let's talk about some of those offense wins. First and foremost is this restaurant bill by Senator Springer and Representative Cody Harris. It's really 6 bills in one. First and foremost, it deals with restaurant permit fees. So it says that a local restaurant a restaurant cannot be charged both a local restaurant fee and a local alcohol fee from their city or county. Before September 1, if you served alcohol, you would pay TABC for your alcohol permit. And then you would also get a bill from your city or county or health department saying you also owe us a percentage of that fee. It's ridiculous. They don't provide you with your alcohol permit. They also charge you a local restaurant permit fee. So it's just duplicative. It's just extra fees to collect revenue, frankly. So we said, no more, you got to charge them one fee. You can't do this stacking fee on top of each other. That's really critical because these fees can be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So right there, we're saving you about $1,000, depending on which type of permit you have and where you're located. That's money you can immediately reinvest into your business and your workforce. Speaking of workforce, we also said that local governments can no longer charge food manager fees if your manager has a state-approved certification like ServSafe. Think about it like I'm a lawyer, right? I get my law license from the state of Texas. I pay a fee for that license. I don't then have to turn around and pay the city of Austin a fee for my state license, right? And so that's exactly what we're doing here. We did it years ago for food handlers, and now it applies to food managers as well. So saving your employees, saving your business money that you can reinvest into your local community. This bill also prohibited cities, counties, and the Department of State Health Services, that's what that acronym stands for, from restricting the packaging, utensils, or straws that a food service business provides to its customers. This is really important because we're seeing cities in other parts of the country either prohibit styrofoam, prohibit single-use plastics. I heard yesterday, actually, that a state in the Northeast is prohibiting all single-use plastics from any governmental entity, right? So you think about all those cafeterias and to-go facilities that have to offer some kind of, utensils. We have to be good stewards of the environment. There's a lot of great innovative packaging coming out, which is great. But we need flexibility to figure out what packaging makes the most sense in what circumstance, right? If you've got a curry or a soup or some kind of really liquidy item, you can't put that in a compostable, biodegradable container, right? It's just going to be a mess. So we need to see the market continue to evolve along those lines, offer new products. But in the meantime, we really need businesses to be free to make the right product selections for their business. And this ensures that you have that flexibility everywhere across the state. We also, in this bill, stopped local health departments from enforcing rules that differ from statewide standards until they have been posted in a public database for at least 60 days. What does this mean? You've probably all heard of TIFR, right? Or the food code. That is our very comprehensive set of health rules that apply in restaurants across the state. Our cities in Texas have the ability to add more and different rules on top of that. All we're saying with this piece of this bill is that if they are going to do that, they have to first share what those rules are at least 60 days in advance on a public website. This makes sure that we can know what the rules are. We can make sure you know what the rules are. And we can all spend less time trying to figure out what the rules are and more time enforcing them and making sure that we're keeping the public safe. Finally, this bill clarifies that ceilings, bar fronts, wall art, etc., do not have to meet the same cleanable surface standards that apply to cooking, prep, and eating surfaces. Sounds silly, but believe it or not, we had a health inspector who was not allowing a restaurant to have any wood accents. So think about like wooden picture frames, wooden beams, right? Things like that, because they said that those were permeable surfaces that you couldn't sort of keep clean to the same standards of a prep surface. Well, obviously no one's eating on wall art or ceilings. Hopefully something's gone terribly wrong if that's the case. And so it's just kind of codifying that logical distinction, right? Has to still be kept clean, but you can have permeable surfaces like wood. So that, again, 6 bills in one. Just passing this bill alone would have been a pretty great session for Texas restaurants, but this is just the first of many slides on that. Next is regulatory consistency. There's been a lot of misconceptions about this bill. I'm going to clear some of those up in a minute, but first let's just talk about what this bill actually says. It says cities and counties cannot regulate on a subject that the state has already addressed in these 7 codes of law. And there's an exception if the state has given a local government explicit authority to regulate in that area. For example, sexually oriented businesses is a subject that the state has always said local governments, you're closest to the people, you regulate that really sensitive, important topic. That doesn't change with this bill. But for other topics, for example, predictive scheduling, what breaks you have to provide your employees, what employee benefits you have to provide, property rights, lending rules. These are sort of macroeconomic topics that the state has already addressed. We don't, in that case, need cities and counties to add conflicting rules on top of that, right? It creates confusion, it creates a lot of redundancy, and then you don't know when you cross city lines what rules apply. Keep in mind, we're the world's 7th largest economy, but we have 254 counties, over 1,200 cities. So if those hundreds of different local jurisdictions all create their own rules, it becomes unworkable really fast. So that's exactly what this bill is designed to prevent. Here's some kind of clearing up the record on this. You may have seen some news about rest and water breaks. This bill does not outlaw or stop rest and water breaks. Employers are still required to provide rest and water breaks. If you don't, you will get in trouble. There are very serious enforcement penalties, as there should be, because that is a safety issue. Also, this bill does not encourage frivolous lawsuits. There is zero money to be made by filing lawsuits under this bill. All you get is a government order saying stop doing something, and attorney's fees. You cannot get any damages. There's no get-rich scheme here. And then also, really importantly, the Regulatory Consistency Act preserves many, many instances of local control. Cities and counties will still be able to have zoning regulations, food and sanitation regulations. They're in charge of emergency response, public safety, nuisances, water, animal welfare, right? There's a whole list of topics that our local governments are the entity that they're in charge of those topics. That will not change with this bill. What changes with this bill is we're saying for those macroeconomic topics that impact employers all across the state, they need one set of predictable rules on those topics. Also, in terms of regulatory consistency, we have a few sort of specific bills. We've prohibited cities from banning an energy source. What do I mean by that? We've seen cities in California and elsewhere prohibit new construction from having natural gas hookups. That would be hugely problematic for our industry. Natural gas is obviously a key cooking instrument. It's how you get to certain temperatures to cook food. So this ensures that we don't have any of those natural gas bans here in Texas. We've also have this property development rule. So there are already laws on the books that require local governments to approve construction documents within certain timeframes, right? So that we can get new construction moving forward, both on the residential and commercial side. This bill puts some teeth into that because what the legislature found was that cities were still missing many of those deadlines. And so now, if the city misses its deadline to review certain documents, you can go have that work done by a third-party engineer or someone the local government has already approved to do that work. So it gives you an alternative if a city is just not able to meet its deadlines. Really important as we are seeing so much restaurant new construction here in Texas. Okay, this is a big one, property tax relief. We came into this session knowing we were going to get some form of tax relief, property tax relief specifically. All of the elected officials were calling for it. We had a huge budget surplus because of the strength of our economy. And so we knew we were going to get it in some form or fashion. The key was who is going to get it. Elected officials are very driven to take care of their voters. Makes sense, right? And by far the largest portion of voters are older homeowners. So as you can imagine, protecting them and the property tax relief proposals was really important. We didn't disagree with that, but we said it's really important that you don't leave out commercial property owners from this equation. Because think about property tax as sort of a seesaw, right? If you take all the pressure off of the residential side, all that pressure is going to be taken up by the commercial side, right? It's not as if that revenue simply goes away. It just gets shifted to other taxpayers. And actually, commercial businesses in Texas already pay an outsized portion of our tax burden. We like to talk about Texas being a small tax state, but most of our majority of our taxes are actually taken on by business. And so we didn't want to see that get worse with property tax relief. Really proud of the fact that the legislators heard that cry, really that appeal, and they decided to dedicate $12 billion to compress everyone's school tax rates. So think of this as the state, because your property tax bills come from your local governments, right? Your local school district, your local city and county. So basically with this $12 billion, the state is paying a portion of everyone's tax bill, whether you're over 65 or under, whether you're a homeowner or a commercial property owner, everyone's getting the same kind of benefit. There's also this 3-year circuit breaker pilot program that's trying to get at the increase in property value growth. It's 20% a year, so it's still pretty high, but I think it's encouraging to at least see legislators acknowledge that the commercial side needs some protections when we're talking about skyrocketing property tax appraisals. I think we've got a question, so let me look at that real fast. Someone said, we need more consistency for licensing and permitting for new restaurants county to county. Since COVID, city halls have switched to electronic applications, which are sometimes confusing. It's very difficult to talk to someone on the phone since they've gone completely online. Yeah, I totally agree. I think what we saw this session is that we've made a lot of progress in terms of streamlining some of these permits, streamlining some of these regulations, but it also kind of taught us that we're just sort of scratching the surface. I mean, again, we're talking about a state with 254 counties, 1,200 cities. Often the health departments are either sort of within one of those cities or counties, or they're a conglomerate of different cities and counties, and they all do things differently. So this is definitely the start of an ongoing project of how can we get more consistency, more logic into the permitting process, and also make sure that you get the customer service that you need. To your point, it's sometimes hard to get someone on the phone. You don't know what the delay is. You have to go back through new approvals. And then, yes.
So just jump in real quick. I think if that individual wants to send us a separate note on where they're located directly, we can have the local chapter. That's one of the benefits, right? Is you've got the state office, but then we've got 23 locations around the state chapters that can lean in. And this is some of the work that we do. So we're happy to help this individual. If you just want to let us know where you are, we'll make that connection for you. You can email us directly.
Absolutely. That was exactly what I was going to say is
sorry.
No, you said it so well. Please lean on us. We hear from restaurants all the time who, are like, I've been waiting 6 months for this permit or this approval. And we say, really wish you had reached out to us, not on the 6 month, but earlier so we can help. So yeah, no issue like that is too small. We have lots of relationships across the state, and that's a key part of what we do is just help problem solve in these situations. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Maybe. Okay. Next is franchise tax relief. So as part of that property tax relief package, again, the legislators really wanted to make sure that businesses were not left out of this equation. And so they created some improvements to the franchise tax system. Not all restaurants pay the franchise tax because of these small business exceptions, but many do. And so this will help a lot of restaurants across the state. The biggest change is that the no tax due revenue threshold will increase from $1 million to $2.47 million. What does that mean? This is the cutoff that determines if you have to pay franchise taxes or not. Used to be $1 million. Now we're bumping all the way up to 2.47 million. And even more exciting, it will now be indexed for inflation. So we will see that $2.47 million figure go up in the future. Again, this should help a lot of smaller to medium restaurants get excluded from this tax altogether, which is great. They also repealed the requirement in the past, even if you didn't have to pay the franchise tax, you had to file a form saying, hey, I don't have to pay the franchise tax, and here's why. That will no longer be the case. This is all effective for reports filed on or after this January 1. So basically immediate effect, immediate relief to small and medium-sized restaurants, which is great. All right, so now we're moving on to alcohol. There was one sort of exciting alcohol bill that passed for restaurants this year, deals with vintage wine. So this bill allows restaurants to purchase vintage wine directly from a private wine collection seller. That seller can't have any sort of financial interest in a TABC regulated business. So they can't sort of do this on the side. This has to truly be someone who is not in the business of selling alcohol. And there's certain permits that are required. The wine has to be at least 20 years old in its original sealed container. Excitingly, a restaurant can then sell that wine to their consumers for on-premises consumption. Why do we care? Well, so much of the restaurant experience is providing something unique to a consumer that they can't get in other places. So this is an exciting opportunity for restaurants that are sort of in the wine business to provide a unique experience to their guests, which is something that we always support. Now we're moving on to sort of the employee welfare, employee well-being, workforce priorities that we set for ourselves this session. We really made it a point to look for bills we could support, ideas we could bring forward that would benefit the people that make our industry run. You've heard us say this before, but you cannot operate a strong restaurant without a strong team of people. And so more and more, we're looking at how can we invest in those people, especially as we meet the needs of our growing state, right? We're gonna need to bring more people into our industry. And importantly, we have to keep them in our industry because we have turnover rates that are way too high and that add to your costs. So this is an important one on that note, community college funding. This is exciting because it's not just new money going into the system, but it's new money tied to actual performance metrics. So instead of just paying community colleges based on the number of people they have in a class on a given day, we're actually going to award, do you have people who are graduating? Are they graduating with credentials they actually need to work in our workforce today based on what the workforce needs? Are you transferring students into four-year degree programs, right? So sort of looking at those actual outcomes and making sure that we're rewarding those. I think we got a chat here. Thanks, Anna. Good to hear from you. Next, still on the employee well-being side, childcare. This is another issue that we are continuing to champion, especially over the next year and a half. There were two bills we supported to advance childcare this past session. This one definitely won a flag. So this will allow cities and counties to provide property tax exemptions to childcare facilities in their local government district. Importantly, childcare facilities have to meet certain benchmarks and serve at least 20% subsidized students to qualify. And what I mean by that, these subsidized students, it's sort of like a scholarship program, and they're only awarded by the state to working families who meet certain income thresholds, right? So we're providing a subsidy to help someone get the childcare they need to stay in the workforce, which is really important. So these childcare facilities have to serve those students to qualify. Definitely want to flag this one because this issue will be on the upcoming November ballot. So the voters have to approve it in order for it to take effect. Definitely something I personally support. I know many others because our childcare system in Texas is really in a crisis. To operate a quality childcare center is almost a financial impossibility. When you think about, you can only have a certain number of students per classroom. You need to be able to hire really quality, capable people to serve as teachers. And it's a difficult teaching job, right? We're talking about infants all the way to 4-year-olds. I'm not qualified to teach those kids. And it's critically important because not only does that allow people to stay in the workforce, but it ensures that once these kids start kindergarten and elementary school, they're actually prepared and can succeed and can eventually graduate and hopefully work in our industry. So really important, and these property tax exemptions would go a long way towards helping these childcare facilities really stay afloat financially, which we desperately need them to do. This is the second childcare bill that made it this session. This is an exciting one because it's all about how can we leverage public-private partnerships, right? Childcare is one of those things that because it is so expensive, we really need the government, the nonprofit, the private sector, the families, right? Everyone needs to have a financial stake in this industry to make it work. So this bill really encourages more partnerships between our school districts that offer pre-K and the private childcare providers that offer pre-K so that we can close some of those gaps and have more pre-K programs available. It also creates a scholarship program to help childcare teachers. Again, really important because these teachers have an incredibly difficult job. They're often, I think their average wage is like $10 an hour. It's shockingly low. And they have to get certain degrees and certificates to even qualify. So you're talking about people who are taking on tremendous debt to really work in a important job that frankly cannot pay them well. So this is another really important way to sort of build up that industry and that supply of childcare. Let's see, we got a chat here. Thanks, Marco. Good to hear from you. This is fun to have people pop in with comments as we go. Okay, next is employee benefit resources. This is an idea that we brought to Senator Hancock and Representative Guillen. And we basically said, listen, restaurants are mostly small businesses. They're required by Obamacare to offer health insurance. They want to offer health insurance, but so often they don't know where to turn, right? They don't know what's a good family leave policy, what's a good resource I can share with my employees on mental health care, right? They're looking for information and resources that small businesses often just don't have on their own. First, please come to us. We have lots of those information and resources. But even for small businesses who aren't in our industry, right? There's a lot of small businesses in Texas looking to do more for their employees, but they don't know where to turn. And so we said, why don't we have the Texas Workforce Commission? They're already in this space. They already provide information about childcare and other benefits. Let's require them to have a website that's free on their website, a page on their website, I should say, that just consolidates a lot of this information into one place. So when someone's looking for answers, looking for information and resources, they have this one place they can go. Also great for us because hopefully we can share some of our resources and information as the association with a new audience on that webpage.
Kelsey, I would just put a plug in real quick because I think one of the things as a team you can see us prioritizing is sort of what I call both sides, which is let's make sure we have the right regulatory environment, but then let's also make sure we give you the right tools to support your teams. We're a service-based industry. And so it's not as if we can just produce more widgets at home. And so I think I would just say, stay tuned. We're really excited to make a pretty profound announcement in October about a new benefit that we've been able to scale for every restaurant across Texas around this sort of employee health and well-being. So, this is part of the work, is let's get it into a place that helps you. We know you want to do all you can to keep your team members and their families, really well cared for, but the restaurant business model has not made it easy. So my plug is just to stay tuned. I'm very excited and proud of the work that we're doing in this space. And we will bring that to you in about 2 weeks, which is exciting.
Yes, good plug. One more on this sort of employee well-being side. The legislature passed this bill, HB 1996. It allows for a new insurance product to be sold in Texas. It'll be called a group family leave policy. Businesses and or employees can purchase the product. And you can see here, it's really to provide paid time off to take care of a new child, a sick family member, that sort of thing. And so this is, again, just another tool. It's not going to work for everyone, but I think the more tools that we have available in the market, the better. And we're aware of several providers that want to create this policy in Texas. And as it's written on the bottom there, they can start writing those policies on or after January 1. So again, we like more options, more tools, so that restaurants can find solutions that work for them and their team. All right, food safety and food security are topics that we are more and more engaged in at the Texas legislature. And we have a few sort of offense wins on, I was saying offensive wins, and I was like, that sounds like offensive wins. So now I'm trying to come up with a different phrase, but we have a few wins on that note we want to share with you too. This is a big one, food allergens. Y'all know that the number of people in America with a serious food allergy continues to increase at a pretty alarming rate. So it's really a safety issue and a liability issue that restaurants have to be cognizant of. ServSafe Food Handler, ServSafe Food Manager both cover food allergens, and there are now ServSafe allergen trainings, sort of an introductory and a more advanced version that you can get at a discount for being a TRA member. So there are training resources out there. But this bill kind of takes that a little bit one step further. And I'll tell you, there is a woman who has worked for years, probably almost a decade, to get a bill passed in Texas on this topic. She tragically lost her son, who died after having an allergic reaction after eating at a restaurant. So it is a serious topic. I know y'all know that, but I just want to sort of share the backstory, because it does matter. And Emily and I have seen this mother work tirelessly to have change created in Texas. But what we did is we sort of worked with the doctors who were working with that mother to try to create new law. And we said, we know this is an issue that we have to address, but we need to do it in a way that's smart, in a way that doesn't create government mandates for the sake of creating government mandates. We really need to do something that actually improves safety, improves education, so that we can meet our shared goal of keeping people safe. And so here's where we landed. Restaurants are going to be required to have a new allergen poster in an employee area of the restaurant. So a break room, the kitchen, that sort of thing. The Texas State Department of Health Services is already developing that poster. It'll be a simple sort of 8.5 by 11. We're really emphasizing to make it graphic, so that you don't have to worry about sort of language barriers, right? It shouldn't be a bunch of words on a page. It should really be something that you look at and it serves as a quick reminder of what the major allergens are and what restaurant employees need to do to prevent an allergic reaction or respond if one occurs. And then the bill also says that food handler and food manager courses need to cover the key information about food allergens. Good news is our ServSafe food handler and food manager courses already do that. So if you're using those products, you're already in compliance. And then we added some things to the bill too. So we said local governments can't create different food allergen rules. This is a real win for us because, as you'll know, we like regulatory consistency and predictability. it doesn't help everyone if Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso all create different rules and standards, right? This is a safety issue where we really need to make sure everyone is clear on the set of rules and procedures. The bill also states specifically there's no new private cause of action or change in legal duty. Again, really important because we're not trying to create a bunch of lawsuits. We're trying to keep people safe. And then we also got a delayed effective date. So none of these things that we've just talked about become law until September 1st, 2024. So you've got a little more time to make sure everyone's aware of the rules and ready to comply.
And Kelsey, I'll just add, I think this is where I'm just going to just make a plug for the TRA, because I think this is really where the work that we do that you don't see matters, right? So this, and Kelsey's right, we met this mother, it was incredibly tragic, wanted to help, but also needed to manage the business side of it. But the fact that we were at the table working together with elected officials, with this individual, this incredible mother, right, who just never gave up, that is what we do on your behalf. And so I think that's just a really important point, is that while you're running your businesses and providing hospitality and doing all the things you do, this is where the TRA is at the table, making sure that we do, we're always going to vote in the name of safety, but then doing it in a way that both helps your business achieve that goal and ensures that customer and that employee knows, what is expected when it comes to allergens. So this to me is just a great case study of the policy work that we do continuously year round, not even in the session.
Well said. A couple other food items. There's a bill to create a new Office of Food Security within the Texas Department of Agriculture and to develop a food system security plan. We're excited to be a part of that process. We have really educated lawmakers and the public about the fact that restaurants aren't just a nice to have, as Emily said, they're really critical infrastructure. They're how we feed people. And so we need to be thinking about things like food security, but we need to be doing it with all the stakeholders at the table, including restaurants. Oysters, again, in terms of food availability and industry, we created a commercial oyster mariculture advisory board. This is a pretty new industry in Texas, basically oyster farming, has amazing environmental benefits for our coast and also has great economic benefits. It's another product that Texas restaurants can sell that, is created right here in Texas and sold right here in Texas. The challenge has been that when you create a new industry and you have different state agencies regulating that industry, there can be a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy. And so this new board is really going to step in and make sure that industry has a seat at the table and that we can get rid of some of this unnecessary red tape that is kind of slowing the growth of this new industry. Big shout out to Brad Lomax and our Coastal Bend chapter of the TRA. They've really driven this. We've created some great allies along the way, including Chairman Hunter, who's been a fantastic ally of Texas restaurants. So it's exciting to see a new industry that does so much good for our state. And then right to farm. This is another issue that is on the November ballot. So make sure to go out and vote if you are eligible. This bill really just affirms in our Texas Constitution the fact that folks have the right to engage in farming and ranching. At the same time, we know there are times when government needs to regulate it. So that can certainly proceed when it's needed to protect public health and safety. Okay, I think this is the last one on our sort of offense win slide, and I flag it because our next webinar, Tuesday, October 3rd, is going to dive into this in more detail. One of the questions I get more than anything from our restaurant operators is how to navigate service animals. Believe it or not, I had a restaurant ask me about a customer with an emotional support squirrel the other day. So there's a lot of questions that come up in this space. Unfortunately, we've all seen that some people have kind of taken advantage of the laws and, they improperly claim that a pet is a service animal when they're not. That can be really disruptive to a restaurant environment, but more than that, it can be really problematic for the people who truly need service animals. So this law was passed last session to increase the criminal penalty that exists for improperly using a community service animal. Again, we're going to be joined by our friends at the Texas Humane Legislation Network in a couple weeks to talk about this in much more detail. So please tune into that if you can. And my good friend Erica just dropped the link in the chat to register for that. Okay, so now that was a lot of offense. Let's talk about some of our defense. So first and foremost, we were able to secure an exemption so that restaurant employees do not have to take a new opioid overdose training. This is one of those really well-intentioned ideas, right? We all know that we have an opioid epidemic in our country that is claiming a lot of lives very tragically. And so a lawmaker wanted to require everyone who takes alcohol seller server training to also have this opioid overdose training. We were able to work with that lawmaker. We expressed concerns. Restaurant employees are often very young. They move around a lot. And just bottom line, they're not healthcare professionals, right? They're not healthcare professionals. They're not emergency response individuals. And so we were just concerned about putting those employees in that situation or requiring them to be in that situation. So we were able to exempt all restaurants from that requirement. And we actually were able to use a definition for restaurant that we passed in the previous session. So it's a great example of how we sort of are able to stack our policy wins on top of each other to have a bigger impact. And that definition is very broad. You can read it here, but it's essentially commercial cooking that you sell for on or off premises consumption. So very broad. And as long as you fit within that definition, you do not need to worry about this new training requirement. Sarah, I see your question. I'll get to that here in a bit. We also, very, very important, protected the tip credit and valid tip pools. Every session, there are bills filed to eliminate the tip credit. That would be incredibly detrimental to our industry and most importantly to our employees who really rely on tips to drive up their take-home pay. The average hourly rate of take-home pay in a full-service restaurant right now is $27 an hour. Incredible earning potential, especially when you think about, our industry provides a third of Americans with their first job. We're often a last chance employer. So incredible earning potential in our industry because of the tip credit. And so it's very important that we continue to protect that moving forward. We also ensured wine cannot be brought into a restaurant with a full bar permit. Again, this is an important issue for employees' tips. Taking a 20% on a full bottle of wine being purchased is very different than 20% on a corkage fee. And it's really important to restaurants' bottom line. Increasingly, alcohol is an important, really critical part of many restaurants' P&L statements, how they're able to make a small profit and carry on. And so we want to make sure that we are not undercutting that restaurant's ability to really bring in the revenue they need and support the servers that they need. We also protected restaurants' right to pass credit card fees to their consumers. This was a really contentious fight, believe it or not. We started the session with a different bill. Our only offensive priority that didn't pass would have said that credit card companies cannot charge you a fee when you collect sales taxes on behalf of the government, right? You have to collect those taxes. You do not keep those taxes. You are basically acting as an arm of the state. And unfortunately, you are paying Visa and MasterCard for that privilege. We think that's wrong. We asked the legislature to stop it. But as you can imagine, the credit card companies fought back very strongly and were able to prevent that bill from ultimately passing, although we did get it out of the Texas House Committee after a really great hearing. So after that fight, they then went after your ability to pass those fees on. And we were adamant that that we not go backwards, because right now you have that ability to pass credit card fees to your consumers if you so choose. Sarah, to your question, we don't know the exact percentage of Texas restaurants that are doing that. It's definitely a minority. And I would say it's something that we really caution restaurants against for a few reasons. One, there's just a lot of pushback right now. There's a lot of resistance to sort of add-on fees. We all, as consumers, I think, feel a bit nickel and dimed. We've all gone to hotels and gotten a resort fee when you never used the pool or the gym, or maybe it was closed. There's a lot of tipping fatigue right now because of technology. You know, we've all checked out and had a true transaction and then been asked to tip on top of that. And that's not really the traditional expectation, right? The expectation is you tip when you receive a service, and a good service, not when you just enter into a transaction. So consumers are feeling that pinch. They're feeling nickel and dimed, and they're often subject to these same cost pressures that restaurants are, right? They're paying more at the gas pump. They're paying more for their utilities, for their groceries. And so our recommendation in almost every instance is don't add a credit card fee, either look at a cash discount or just raise your prices, you know, slightly to really make that adjustment across the board. But we do believe strongly that restaurants should have that option, because they have that option today. And we're always going to take the side of restaurants having the option to do what's best for their business and their consumers. Emily, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think it's well said. I think what we've always said is we want to give you every tool in the toolbox. We would just caution. We know that when we get a lot of inquiries about both tipping, which is way up, which is great for our employees, but also when there is a charge that is mandatory, that is not transparently available to the consumer to understand, there's tremendous pushback. And so it's really that balance of, you know, it's one thing to have a conversation and an open dialogue like in COVID with your customers about what you're doing. It's different than putting on a mandatory 20% surcharge. We're watching very closely what's happening in New York City. There's tremendous pushback on this method because the points that Kelsey just raised. So I would really look at your own business, look at your consumers, and then think about other ways like a cash discount that can help get you through. I know that it's federal, but Kelsey would likely at the end will get into the Credit Card Competition Act that we're working very hard with federally to help reduce some of these fees for you by inserting competition. But right now, just be very cautious if you're just simply going to pass on 3.5%.
Agreed. Abby said, what about us paying a credit card fee on top of the sales tax amount? So Abby, that's what we tried to outlaw this past session. We had a very successful hearing in the Texas House. We actually got the chairman of the House, Representative Capriglione, to file the bill for us, which was great. And we really made a compelling case to the legislators. At that point, the credit card companies were on their heels, and so they hired a bunch of lobbyists and were able to sort of kill it quietly without debate, without sunshine. And so it's an issue that we need to take a look at for next session. I would say we probably will take a different approach, because as unfair as the credit card fee on sales tax is, it doesn't really get to the heart of the problem. And I'll get into this a little bit more on our federal issues, but the heart of the problem is you have to participate in a market that is incredibly, that's a duopoly. There's no competition, right? And so that's an uneven playing field that we need to address. So
and realize it's about $700 million just in the state of Texas, we estimate, not restaurants, but those credit card transactions and that fee that you're paying on the taxes. So It's a massive amount of money, but as Kelsey said, sometimes you have to approach things differently. For us, it is an injustice that you are paying a fee to do a job for the government that you don't have a choice to not do. And so we may come at this differently, but I think it is something that you can even tell we get very passionate about because it is wrong. It is a lot of money to your bottom line. And let's remember that credit card swipe fees are typically the third line of expenses, the highest you pay to run a restaurant, and you have no negotiating power with a duopoly. So more to come on this, because I'll talk about it all day. We'll make Kelsey crazy, but we are on this, and we know that we can get something done here for you.
Yep. I see the 80-20-30 rule in the Q&A question in the Q&A too. We're going to get to that in a couple slides, but I see you. Okay. A few more defensive wins here. We negotiated to ensure online privacy laws do not negatively impact restaurant websites, loyalty programs, third-party reservation and delivery platforms, or franchise agreements. That sounds sort of lofty legalese, but it's really important. Texas is one of many states, and plus the federal government, that's taking a really critical look at online privacy. Issues like what data is the consumer sharing? Do they know they're sharing that data? Do they own that data? Can they require businesses to delete it? And if you're thinking to yourself, well, we're a restaurant, we don't deal with data. You probably have a loyalty program. You probably use OpenTable or DoorDash or Uber Eats or Toast, right? All of those systems are collecting some level of data. And so we negotiated with lawmakers to ensure that all of those just kind of regular commercial enterprises would not be impacted by these laws. But believe it or not, that was not always the case with these proposals. For example, there was one bill that was proposed to really protect minors online, which is certainly a need in a very serious issue. But as originally drafted, it would have required every website, every app to verify someone's age before they can interact with your website or app at all. And by verify, I mean with a photo ID, with some kind of document proving they are who they say they are and they're over 18. You can imagine how that would impact pizza delivery, Raising Cane's,
Crumble cookie.
Yeah, I mean, the list goes on, right? Even restaurants that don't, sort of target young people would have had to prove that all of the people interacting with their service were an adult. So we were able to get that law changed so it was more in line with the intent. But again, that's an example to Emily's point earlier. You don't have time. You aren't engaged in negotiating online privacy laws, right? That's not something that you are in a position to do as a small business owner. That's the work that we do behind the scenes to make sure that you never feel that impact and that you're protected from it. We also ensured restaurants are not all required to participate in E-Verify for all new hires. This is an ongoing debate occurring in our federal government right now, in fact. Our position is that border security, immigration are government functions. They're the responsibility of the federal government and not something that we should outsource or sort of expect our private companies to do on behalf of the government. We also blocked a bill that would have allowed local governments to require restaurants to purchase, install, and maintain automated external defibrillators. You've probably seen these. They're sort of red boxes. They shock your heart if you go into AFib or some kind of heart attack. Many restaurants have them, which is great. But when we get into sort of unfunded mandates of private businesses being required to not only purchase these, but maintaining them is an expensive service contract as well. That's where we have to step in and talk about, unfunded mandates and who's expected to sort of pay for these things and deal with the liability and that sort of thing. Yes, Marco, AEDs are optional, not something that local governments can require. Here's a couple other bills that we had, we watched closely to make sure they wouldn't have unintended consequences. But we do want to make sure you're aware of them because they do have an impact for restaurants. Hair discrimination. This bill added hairstyles commonly or historically associated with race to existing discrimination laws in Texas. Importantly, there are no new enforcement provisions or penalties. Just like you can't refuse to hire someone because of their race or promote someone because of their race, you can't make decisions based on people's protected hairstyles. So braids, locks, twists, that sort of thing. This did go into effect September 1st. So please make sure it's something that your hiring managers, your other managers, right, your leadership is aware of. Certainly
And
not.
just be consistent, right? I think that's the message here, that if you have a specific, it's for all employees. And I think that's where you need to, because I think, Kelsey, we've seen some outreach in the last couple of weeks and even just yesterday.
Yes.
I think it's a lot of common sense, but make sure you understand it, because you don't want to do anything inadvertently.
That's right. We're not aware of any restaurant that, was purposefully doing anything like this. Where restaurants need to be thoughtful, and I think what Emily's getting at is there are rules about sort of health rules about hair, right? If you're in the back cooking, you have to have your hair, you have to have a hairnet or a cap or sort of have your hair back. That's where it's important to just treat everyone consistently. So everyone with long hair, regardless of your hairstyle, has to do X because of health and safety, right? Those are the kind of rules that you have to enforce because of the health codes. And at the same time, you just want to make sure you're not inadvertently violating this new protection. This is another one that will impact restaurants. All employers are going to be required to post a notice about a hotline that folks can anonymously call to report violent or suspicious activity to DPS. This bill already went into effect, but the sort of poster has not been developed yet. So by March 1st, the Texas Workforce Commission is required to adopt these rules. They'll have an actual sample that you can download for free, and then you'll need to post that in a break room or some other spot where employees can see it. Again, a big win for us. There's no enforcement, there's no penalties. This isn't meant to be punitive. It's really meant, it goes back to that old adage, see something, say something. Again, unfortunately, this came out of a tragic circumstance where, someone was sort of giving folks red flags, but hadn't violated any laws yet. And so the idea is to really let people know that they have a safe place to report, if they're concerned about something. Please make sure you follow our newsletters. That is your easiest, quickest way to know when things like this new poster become available and you need to make that update. Okay, I'm going to skip over some of this because I'm mindful of the time. So some of our ongoing work. First of all, hopefully you all know the executive director who leads your region of the TRA. They are your first line of defense and offense when it comes to local advocacy. We don't talk enough about local advocacy, but I'll tell you, they say all politics is local, and I think our local governments have probably the strongest ability to help or hurt your business. You think about things like permitting, you think about things like zoning, wet, dry, alcohol elections, public safety, so critically important, roads, infrastructure, right? Recycling, grease traps, all of those things are decided at the local level and can really impact your business. We've got several wins on here that we're really proud of, and we continue, as I said earlier, to work on things like permits, budgeting, tax rates. It's that season right now. And also noise ordinances is a topic that continues to come up where we need to make sure we're being really proactive and also good neighbors. At the state level, hopefully you heard about the Texas Travel Industry Recovery Grant. I bet many of you on this call have applied for one or both versions of that grant, and you're probably still waiting in line. If your grant status is processing right now, that means you're in line, you submitted your application, and they are working through those applications to figure out how much money, well, they know how much money they have, how many of the grants they'll be able to fund. So please make sure that you are checking the email that is associated to that application, because if they have any questions or need any information, that is how they will contact you. And if they don't hear back from you in a certain amount of time, they will close your application, and we don't expect the portal to reopen at this point. So just please make sure you're staying on top of that. There's also a new program called the Texas Music Incubator Tax Rebate Program. And this actually is not related to COVID at all. And this is a program that the state created to really help the live music industry grow in Texas. So if you're a restaurant that regularly has live music, reach out to me, look at our newsletter. We've got some information about how you might qualify for this tax rebate. A new initiative we're launching is called the Employers for Childcare Task Force. There'll be a big announcement about this coming soon. But as you've heard, childcare is an issue that we are going to continue to lean into. We really think there's a need and an opportunity for private employers to really speak out and say, this is an issue that matters to us, because workforce development is such a critical issue facing our state. So more to come on that. We are expecting one or more special sessions of the Texas legislature this fall. So I said earlier that Texas legislature only meets for 140 days every other year. That's for our general sessions. The governor also has the ability to call a special session, which is limited to 30 days, when the legislature can only deal with the topics that the governor selects, and he can call as many of those as he wants. We're expecting one to be called pretty soon related to school vouchers or school choice. People call it different things, and some of the education issues. So we'll certainly be watching that, especially if there's any impact on school finance and how that impacts our career and technical education programs like Texas Pro Start, which is our culinary arts program in Texas high schools. Rulemaking. After every session, there are a lot of rules that get proposed to implement all of the new laws that have been passed. I mentioned the food allergen rules. There's lots that we are monitoring between TABC, the health departments, et cetera, just to make sure that there aren't any unintended consequences there for your business. We're also very busy fundraising. All of this advocacy work is not cheap, and it's a constant investment for us as an association and for us as an industry. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but that is something we are very busy doing. And then preparing for next session as well. That advocacy work never stops, as I mentioned. Federal, lots of work happening at the federal level as well. Lots of rulemaking happening at the federal level right now. What we're seeing is that Congress is increasingly sort of deadlocked on political lines, and so they aren't able to pass as many laws. And so more and more, the rules and the laws that are developed come from our federal agencies. So for example, the Department of Labor has an overtime proposal right now that would increase the current threshold by 55% and add an automatic increase every 3 years. What does that mean? That means that currently, if you have employees making about $35,000 or more, they can be exempted from the overtime time and a half requirement. That threshold would be increased all the way up to, I think it's $55,000 a year. So a really big bump that would add a lot of payroll costs to a lot of different restaurants. So we are working with our colleagues at the National Restaurant Association to submit comments by November on that proposal. But it's definitely something that we are concerned about because of the costs that have been adding up for your business. Other changes we're monitoring, there's NLRB proposals on the joint employer rule, big concern for franchisors and franchisees. There is a final rule expected soon on the independent contractor classification. This goes to whether or not someone qualifies as an independent contractor or they're an employee. If they're an employee, there's a bunch of other rules and tax situations that apply. And then the OSHA is also working on a heat illness prevention rule. Really proud that one of our board members, Louis Rainey, is a part of those discussions. Heat illness is obviously something that our industry has to be proactive about because Texas is only getting hotter as we experienced this past summer. But also we know commercial kitchens are different than many other industries, for example, outdoor workers. So we just need to make sure that any requirements are logical, make sense, and fit the restaurant setting. We're also working with Congress on issues like immigration and worker visas. Hopefully you saw the announcement last week that the Biden administration made, I think it was 55,000 immigrants eligible for temporary worker protection status, meaning they can actually legally work in the US while they're waiting for their immigration cases to be considered. Really exciting advancement on the worker visas issue. We are working hard on the Credit Card Competition Act, as we alluded to earlier. So this is a federal bill, very proud that our own Texan U.S. Representative Lance Gooden out of the DFW area is an author of this bipartisan bill. It gets at sort of this core issue of the lack of competition in the credit card market. So Visa and MasterCard collectively control upwards of 80% of the American credit card market. They have basically no rules on the fees that they are allowed to charge. And as a result, Americans pay by far the highest credit card rates in the industrialized world. I saw a report the other day that we pay 8 to 9 times the fees that Europeans pay. So hugely out of whack. And to add insult to injury, Visa and MasterCard just announced that they're about to raise their fees again twice in the upcoming year. As a small restaurant, you have no ability to negotiate those fees, right? And you can't refuse to accept credit cards because that's 80 to 90% of your customer base uses credit cards. So what this bill does is it really attacks that lack of competition. It says that for banks with $100 billion in assets or more, so we're talking about the world's largest banks, when they issue a credit card, they have to allow you as a local business to run that credit card transaction on a network other than Visa and MasterCard. So that duopoly will not be allowed to be your only option. You will have another option, and that will bring competition into the space and is expected to lower credit card fees Americans pay by $15 billion a year. Great for Main Street businesses, also really great for consumers. We know that all of those credit cards, as much as we all like our points and our miles and all of our credit card rewards, we're all paying for those rewards, especially people who pay with cash or debit are essentially paying for everyone else's credit card rewards. So this would be great. It's really an Inflation Reduction Act in a lot of ways, right? It lowers costs for businesses and for consumers. Again, it's a bipartisan bill. We've actually been promised a vote in the US Senate by the end of the year. I don't know that that will happen. We'll see. There's a lot of politics involved, as you can imagine. But the credit card companies and the banks are fighting this tooth and nail. They stand to lose $15 billion a year. So if they spend $1 billion on this lobbying effort, that's a drop in the bucket compared to what they'll save. So they are fighting it hard, and it's really important that we show out in force as well. Texas is doing our part. We sent a letter urging every single one of our federal lawmakers to sign on to this bill as a co-sponsor. We've got some social media out right now. Several of our members did interviews where they talked about what this reform would mean to them. You're going to see more and more activity on this, but as you can tell, we're fired up about it. It is truly a David versus Goliath fight. David won, and I have every confidence that we will eventually win too. It will probably take a while. It'll probably be a hard-fought fight, but it's the right thing to do. And in the end, I think we will eventually win. Emily, anything to add on that?
No, I saw Abby's comment, and yes, so this is a nationwide effort, but let's be clear, we're up against a pretty significant fight. That doesn't mean that things always happen in one session either. So we'll continue to send out the call to action, ask individuals that, simply fill out the form. It'll send the right message to your elected officials. And Abby's right. We need everyone to lean in. It is a significant line item, expense item for all of you. And if we don't get it through this Congress, then we'll be back next, just like the debit card market that we finally were able to crack. So don't give up fighting. And we do have the tools and resources for you.
Exactly right. This will probably be a multi-year effort, but it's worth it. And we're not backing down for sure. 80-20-30 rule. I know we had a question on this earlier. So this was a rule that the U.S. Department of Labor issued. It deals with when you can take the tip credit. I will tell you, it is so convoluted and complicated. I struggle to see how any restaurant could truly comply with this new rule. And because of that, the Texas Restaurant Association filed a lawsuit against the Department of Labor with the Restaurant Law Center, which is our national restaurant legal center, challenging this rule. We have had this litigation going on for almost 2 years now. We've lost at the district court level, which we anticipated. We won at the Fifth Circuit, went back to the district level where we lost again with the same judge. Now we are back in the Fifth Circuit where we won once before. Hoping that we will get a ruling out of the Fifth Circuit soon. But y'all know that, the judicial process is unfortunately painfully slow. And as this lawsuit is ongoing, the rule is currently in effect. And I will tell you that we have started to see creative plaintiffs' lawyers file lawsuits against restaurants and other businesses under this rule. So please make sure that you're familiar with the 80-20-30 rule, that you're doing all that you can to comply. You might need to restructure some of your shifts so that your tipped employees are making the full minimum wage, at the start or end of their shift. There's different ways to do it. But really important that you're careful about this, that you're knowledgeable about this, because it is truly a trap for the unwary, right? No restaurant wants to violate this rule. Everyone's restaurant wants to take care of their employees and make sure they make the absolute most in take-home pay that they can. But this rule is really complicated and really tricky. There is a webinar we recorded back when the rule first went into effect. I say we, it was actually our national colleagues. But we can send that to anyone who has questions, anyone who needs a refresher. Just want to highlight that this is something you need to be taking seriously now, and hopefully we will eventually win our lawsuit moving forward.
Say definitely, I don't know if Erica can post that link to the webinar in the chat, but for the individual who asked that question, I think it'd be great just to go back and also just to reinforce, I think Kelsey's message is this is hard. So don't think you're the only one that is having a difficult time. It's not just here in Texas, it's everywhere. So, if that helps, which I think it will, that was a great webinar. I'm happy to share it with you.
Yes, Erica, if you can find that, that would be great to drop. Okay, here's your homework for the day. Please stay engaged. We really cannot do what we do by ourselves. It truly takes all of us working together to move the needle. So here's a few sort of immediate action items. As I mentioned before, if you applied for the Texas Travel Industry Recovery Grant, please make sure you're checking your email. The last thing you want is to be locked out of that program because you missed an email. In terms of new laws that have gone into effect as of September 1, so this is current right now, pay attention to those local permit fees that you're paying. If you're asked to pay a fee that you think is now illegal under one of the laws that we talked about, send me a note. In many instances, your local government officials probably just didn't hear about the new law. The word hasn't reached them yet. We are happy to talk to them and make sure that that's clear and we get that sorted out. Also make sure that your team is trained on the hairstyles commonly or historically associated with race. As we mentioned before, we know this is not something restaurants are trying to do, but always good to make sure your team is trained and understands their obligations on those important HR topics. And then also, once the Workforce Commission develops that poster that we talked about on workplace violence, which will likely be in March, you'll need to make sure that you post that. And as always, stay tuned to the TRA. We'll provide those posters, we'll provide the updates, so that you know in real time what is expected. Also, don't forget about the November election. Tax relief, childcare, right to farm, those are all on this November election. You can see the date, the early voting time period, vote by mail, and importantly, you do have to be registered to vote in Texas, at least I think it's 30 days before the election. So make sure that you are current on that if you are eligible. I'll also point out there are lots of local races happening the same day, including a Houston mayoral race that we are very much watching and engaged in. So also just want to flag that those local elections can be really important to participate in as well. And then lastly, as I said, we really cannot do this without you. We are a membership organization. We solely exist to serve restaurants in this state. It's very intentional on our part that we work to benefit all restaurants, all of the food service industry in Texas, whether you're a tiny mom and pop food truck, all the way up to the largest chains, caterers, brew pubs, distributors, right? Everyone in between. So the biggest thing that you can do to help us is really to be our ambassadors in the community. We're a small team. We can't be everywhere. There's 55,000 plus food service businesses in Texas. I wish Emily and I could visit with every single one of them, but I don't think we would ever eat or sleep. So that's really where you can help us amplify our impact. Please make sure you've maintained your TRA membership and really encourage your colleagues to do that too. You know, if you don't know where to start, pick one thing from these wins that I just talked about and tell a colleague, hey, did you know that, you know, this law changed in Texas and the TRA led that effort? No? Well, you should really think about joining the TRA, because not only are they doing that work, but they're really sharing the information and the resources and the tools with restaurants to make sure you're not only complying with the law, but really bringing your business to new heights. Please also invest in our advocacy efforts. There's a QR code on the screen that takes you directly to our advocacy fundraising page. We have lots of ways to give. We can accept personal or corporate contributions. You can set up a monthly payment plan, a quarterly, an annual payment plan, whatever works for you. But I will say that every single dollar that you invest goes directly to our advocacy efforts. And it's really one of those things where if everyone invests $10, we will be so much more ahead of the curve in terms of what we're able to accomplish. I've mentioned the newsletter a few times. We try to send that out towards the end of the week every week. It includes a letter from Emily and really the key things that you need to know about. We are trying to make it as skimmable, as quick of a read as possible, because we know you're incredibly busy. We know most emails go unread, but this email is worth reading, I promise you. And then lastly, join us on this Texas tour. If you have a location in one of our cities that we're going to visit next, which I'll show in a minute, send your manager, send your team, visit us if you can. We're also going to have one more of these virtual events in November. So again, a great opportunity to not only attend yourself as an operator, but to include your managers, your team members from across the state. I think we've got another chat. Contribution link dropped in the chat. Thank you, Erica. And then last but not least, we've got the announcement of our additional dates. So we still have Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and one virtual event coming up. So please come visit us. It's a lot more fun when folks are there. And really, these events are for you to learn and to also give us feedback. And so with that, I'm going to turn off the slideshow here. We've got a few minutes for anyone who has questions we didn't get to, or also really importantly, if there are topics that we haven't addressed that you think we need to be paying attention to, please let us know, because we get our best ideas from y'all, as I said at the beginning. Emily, anything to add while we wait for all of these questions and comments to come flying in?
I would just say, I think that when we started this journey together, and really Kelsey and I kind of came in it together because of the pandemic, it's an honor to serve all of you. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. I think that's the most important thing. If something is happening, if something is going on, if you're confused by something, being our member is really local, state, and federal. And when I say the TRA team, we're small but mighty across the state. That's what we live to do, is to help you be successful and to help your employees be successful. So my message is to stay tuned, to read that one newsletter. Honest to God, it started in the pandemic, where we would just every night, if you remember, just do videos, and we were trying to get you information. And now that's sort of gotten to the point where we know it's one email a week for you to be successful in Texas with the sort of regulatory legal workforce pieces. So do not, and if you're not getting that, then make sure you go to the website and sign up again. And then of course, a huge thank you to Kelsey. I hope it's not lost on you, the amount of work that was done. I can assure you, if you line up other states in the nation, you're not going to see this kind of comprehensive legislative and policy work. And I'm really proud of that, and really proud to have Kelsey leading those efforts with Erica and our external lobby team. So huge thank you to you, Kelsey. It just keeps getting better. So very grateful.
Thank you. I'm incredibly grateful to have a job that I love, and to be able to work with people that I love for an industry that is so important. And so please know that, when we talk about these things and we say our industry, it's because we truly feel that way. We're truly passionate about it, and we want to help each of you succeed.
Great. And reach out after. You have our contact. Super easy. Reach out after. I think, Kelsey, I think we're good. And wow, right on time.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. At least today we're on time at this moment. It's not noon.
All right. Well, with that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you, Emily, for joining us. Thank you, Erica, for running all of the tech and everything in the background. As I mentioned, we did record this. So if you missed something, want a refresher, want to share it with a member of your team, just reach out to Erica. I'll type her email in the chat really fast. And as Emily said, just please do not hesitate to reach out. If you have a question, if you have a comment, if you're struggling with something, don't carry this burden alone. That is really what we are here to help you with. All right, I guess we'll sign off. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.